and I'm happy to, put this very important topic in front of you all today. I would just like to, share my screen. Yeah. Good evening, everyone, once again. And uh, Today I'm going to, put up some thoughts on the role of cognitive control and reflective thinking in education. I would be looking at, the role of metacognition and reflective thinking in education. Uh, Cognitive control, I think, is a very broad topic, and it would be very, it is a very, a small duration in which we can address basically that large topic. But I think one subset of it, which is very important, I think, today in modern day education, which is metacognition, and tied up with reflective thinking, I think this could be two very important aspects that we could be addressing in education. In today's session, I would be discussing on, three major points. One would be, trying to, somewhere understand the idea of cognition, cognitive control, and then metacognition, which is again a subset of cognitive control. uh, we can also look into strategies that we can take up for classroom transaction that even I am taking it up in the classes right now. And even I will try and show certain examples that I have used in my classroom, that could act as something which all can take up in our teaching fraternity. Beginning up with the session, I think very importantly, when I'm talking about, we are all seeing an era where, artificial intelligence is something that is, taking up every, I think, domain of our life, be it personal, professional, academic. I think that is something which is, predominantly taking a lot of chunk in the academic life, if I'm seeing it that way. But I think it is very important that in this era where artificial intelligence is taking a predominant role, somewhere we are, on one hand, we are trying to say that we want to inculcate the thinking capacities into the into the learners, into the students. And on the other hand, there are platforms where you don't have to think much, but then there are things that could be very readily available to you to be used. Now we we want to work with AI in the sense that it should complement what we are doing, right? And somewhere I think, if we want to become interdependent, if that role is to be understood, that we also have to use AI, and somewhere not become completely dependent on AI. I think two very important things that I think we can all consider, uh, being teachers. I would be speaking from the perspective of teachers. uh, to be fostered, I think these skills need to be fostered for our students in terms of metacognitive and reflective thinking. I think the first thing that I think that comes to everybody's mind is why metacognitive and why reflective thinking. So somewhere the research suggests that um, uh, if the metacognitive skills are there in the students, it somewhere foster growth in writing. Not only that, it also goes beyond, somewhere you are aware of what you are all about. Not only that, but somewhere you'll be able to also know on the abilities that you have within you, if you have those metacognitive abilities with you. Not only that, if they are explicitly fostered in the education and in the classrooms that we are all involved with. I think the second point, very important point, is if we are talking about metacognitive capacities being fostered, they somewhere result into deeper conceptual mastery. I think very um, important idea that I think all of us are considering, that we see somewhere problems in the way the learners are processing the content, right? I mean, the concepts that we are teaching in the class. sometimes they are oriented towards more of academic achievement rather than in-depth processing of that concept that we are taking up in the class. So I think that is one important point, that why metacognitive thinking. So one is, I think it will result in growth in terms of the way you put up your things in terms of writing. And the other point is, I think, the deeper conceptual mastery that one can look into. When I'm talking about reflective thinking, I think that the research says that it improves academic learning. Not only that, a very positive relationship between metacognitive thinking and reflective thinking is observed. See, I mean, we cannot separate metacognitive thinking and reflective thinking. They all play a very complementary role to one another. And even if I'm talking about critical thinking skills, that I think just now madam mentioned, these skills come together as one skill set that the students, or even I think all of us as teachers should be having. So if this is what is looked into, if we have metacognitive and reflective abilities, then the very idea that I think we can look at is, what is the major goal of education? I mean, um, are we looking at academic achievement? Are we looking at making sure that they are able to clear all the entrance examinations? Are we looking at fostering holistic individual into our classes? What is it that we are looking at? So I think if you are looking at major goal of education, somewhere it is saying that one um, paragraph that focuses on, that is focused by national education policy is, that cognitive regulation is very important, not only for not only for lowering stress, but also it leads to increased academic success. So even national education policy somewhere is putting up a lot of emphasis on metacognitive thinking, or cognitive regulation, because somewhere that will lead to self-regulated learners. Because even I see it in teachers, that when I train them, that I might take up I basically teach critical thinking to my student teachers, so I take it up every day, 2 semesters, one entire year, I teach all of that. But then uh, it's not only teaching, it should result into willing use of it in the classroom. So transacting is one side, and using it from the teacher's end is another side. So what could be that bridge that could help, that you transact and they implement by their will? I think that will is very important. Then we could talk about that self regulation component, which becomes very important, because unless uh, we um, we have self regulated learners in our class, I think none of the things that we take up in the class will succeed. So self regulated learning is something that we all can aim at. The other part is, I think it is very important mental operation that happens into our brains. And uh, when I'm talking about cognitive control, it is one of the higher order cognitive functions, and as madam mentioned, it is one of the executive functions. So it doesn't come easily. So when I'm talking about executive functions form part of the prefrontal cortex, where we are talking about planning, organizing, regulating, reflective thinking, critical thinking, creative thinking, problem solving, metacognition, metacognitive regulation, right? All of these, they form part of executive functions. And I think if education, if classroom teaching is able to improve on executive functions, and then I think all things will fall in place, because then we are generating learners who are self regulated, who are self motivated, who are doing things on time, who are taking up tasks that are important, who are coming to the faculty, to the teachers, to solve their doubts. I think then much of our work as teachers, will reduce because we are able to, generate self-regulated learners. So in order for us to somewhere have those self-regulated learners, I think executive functions, improving the executive functions is very important. And to improve those executive functions, somewhere metacognitive skills and reflective skills into our classrooms can play an important role. So as simple as, example, standing up when asked, writing when told, remaining focused on task in spite of all the distractions. So you would see that, I right now I'm interacting with the higher education, students, but if you go to the lower classes, the smaller grades, second, third, fourth grade, they are the children who are very curious about things, very I would say, very exploring, very high in energy, then it is important that at that point of time somewhere, and even higher education students, we are able to see that when you will be able to, reduce on distractions and, focus on the task which is in front of you, which is very important for you to, you know do. So that then that, time management and all of that will fall in place if, we are able to have this. So ability to, complete work on time. So there are many students who would come and say that, madam, there is a lot of work, there are a lot of assignments, there is, lot to do. What should we do first? So we have to say that, prioritize, time manage. But this time management and all that will happen eventually if executive functions have been, explicitly looked at in our classroom, interactions that we have with our students. Even selecting the best strategy to get marks. All of this, is major goal of education that, I think all of us can be looking at. So I would begin with, the smallest, part of it, with that is cognition. What is cognition? Because, we might have participants who, would like to sequentially, progress with the topic. So if I'm talking about cognition, it just helps us to make sense of things. And I think very important component in education, right? We are all looking at improvement in cognitive processes, improvement in the mental functions, mental processes that we are, taking up. So it helps make sense of things. So, even when I'm right now, talking about this topic, you might be, trying to make sense of things, and you might be thinking, Acha, this is, taken up. Why is this not talked about? I'm able to understand this. I'm not able to understand this. Whatever is happening right now, you're trying to make sense of what I'm doing right now in this session. So it helps us make sense of, objects, events, um, uh, uh, things surrounding us in appropriate contexts. So understanding a text requires cognition. Understanding this lecture, noticing the movements in the plants or the environment around you, all that requires, cognition that, helps us make sense of things. Going to the next point, which is, since we have understood that, we are able to make sense of things, this sensing of things, somewhere requires cognitive, control to be, looked into. Now, what is cognitive control? I mean, very in common parlance, it is, able to control the mental operations. But then why is it very important if I'm just able to control mental operations? So it says that it is intentional selection of thoughts. So like, I'll just share a small experience. When I go and teach the first class that I take up in the universities of critical thinking, which is from 10 to 11. So my students, when they come in front of me, they are, they're with many thoughts that they come out from. They, come from home. They're also, coming from, the background that, they have with their children and families and so many things, assignments, IDs that they take up. So there are so many things that are going on in their mind. So they come and say that, there are many thoughts in our mind. How do I focus? So how do I focus? That's where cognitive control will give you an answer to. So it is very careful, very intentional, very conscious selection of the thought. Which thought? The thought which is very important, the thought where you are able to prioritize, that where you are able to select, that this is important, this needs more priority, this needs, more attention of me, and this is what I should be doing right now. How do I do that? I do that by way of cognitive control. So it is very careful selection of thoughts. Not only thought, it also encompasses emotions. So sometimes you just feel distracted somewhere, sometimes you just feel very low. How do I bring back my, emotional, um, uh, s- uh, uh, emotional, settlement, and come back to what is in front of me, what is very important to me? How do I, do that? How do I come out of my emotions and come to my very conscious thought in front of me? How do I do that? Cognitive control will help. It is also behaviors based on current tasks and demands and social context, and the concomitant suppression of inappropriate habitual actions. So you should be able to naturally delete or you know put lesser attention on inappropriate habitual actions. So very common habitual action is like, after a point of time, say after 10 minutes, I just get distracted and I start looking here and there, and I start surfing my phone, and that is very naturally occurring to all of us. How do I consciously, know on that, and how should I consciously, remove that distraction, come back to what needs more attention? What is going to play role? Cognitive control. So I think very important aspect that the classroom interaction, the teachers, the school system, and even I think parents. As parents, we must be fostering into our, you know, the learners, the children that we all have with us. So I'll quickly go to now the subset of cognitive control, which is metacognition. So metacognition, in common parlance, I think all of us know about it. Meta, uh, meaning to say one's own, and cognition means the mental processes. So somewhere I am able to know my own cognitive processes that I have. So, and that's where we say that only when I am aware of my thought processes, I'll be able to monitor, control, and regulate. So it will not come naturally, because this is something that needs to be practiced explicitly. Only when you practice, it will, start coming, eventually to you. So what is metacognition? Metacognition is cognition about cognition. So thinking about thinking of who, of myself. So thinking about my own thinking processes is metacognition. Only when you have metacognitive abilities, you'll be able to become aware of your abilities. You'll be able to monitor. Since you're aware, you'll be able to monitor, control, and regulate. So my end of self-regulation will, come to me when I have metacognitive abilities, right? And those metacognitive abilities, as I said earlier, is part of, you know, the prefrontal cortex, which is, playing a great role in the executive functions of the brain. So this talks about metacognitive, knowledge talks about three important aspects within it. That is strategic knowledge, cognitive tasks, and it also talks about more about what you are. So I'll be discussing this aspects in the later slides. Now, metacognition, cognition is something that will come to you eventually, because when you are sitting, you will try and make sense of everything. So even if you are feeling cold, you'll try and make sense of it. That I'm feeling cold, and why is it so? So that will happen to you involuntary also. But when I'm talking about metacognitive abilities, those are very conscious in nature. So I really have to, put my effort into thinking about my thinking processes, and it is very systematic in nature. So it has to be fostered explicitly into our daily routines, right? So example, thinking process would be, it will be good if I take notes during the session, right? It will help me realize its meaning, So the metacognitive aspect of what you're making sense of it. So you're making sense of this lecture right now, right? That is cognition. But when you are able to make an additional sense of it, that, it will be good if I take up notes during the session. So now, you know that I will not be able to remember the points, but I'll be able to remember if I take notes. So that is one more that I do not remember when I do not note down. That is what awareness of your own, cognitive processes. Other than that, the example also says that it will help me realize its meaning. So you know that if you take notes, then you'll be able to realize its meaning if you read it later, or when you write it, you'll be able to realize its meaning. So this knowing is what, all of us need. And I would go a little one step further, saying that, I think nowadays I would say that there is a lot of improvement in the way we are, um, uh, fostering the students. Now there is a lot of improvement in the way we are, as teachers, we are making a lot of difference in the classrooms now, because I'm able to see learners that are in front of me that already have this kind of, knowledge. It's not that they do not have it, but I think I'll go one step further and say that we need to use this aspect explicitly in the class. Other than that, I think metacognition is something that students might have, but an additional thing that I feel that can be taken up is the metacognitive regulation. So metacognition, of course, first step that we can explicitly take up in the class. The second step, very important, that I feel needs a lot of attention, is metacognitive regulation along with reflective thinking. So I'll just go ahead with the next slide. So when I'm talking about metacognition, it is basically a self-talk that I do with myself all the time. So what am I trying to make sense of? And, how am I making sense of it? And um, how much am I able to understand, and um, what is it that I look at, further beyond this. This is what I know, and I would like to know more on this. All of this, you'll constantly have that self talk with you, that internal dialogue with you. If it brings down, good outcomes, that's where we are saying that, we are having a good internal dialogue with ourselves. And so that is, metacognition will result into the first point, that is conscious control. Of course, it is a cognitive process. It is focusing on a given input. It also talks about observing the preconception. So you might, observe certain beliefs that you might have from the past experience. So example could be that, I might just bring this belief into this session, saying that, I just do not understand much when the session is, online. But you might get a lot of things from online sessions. So uh, that analysis of that belief that you bring about in to the current situation, and when you try and evaluate that belief, what skills are we using? We are using the metacognitive skills. And it doesn't come by itself, it comes with reflective thinking. So of course we'll discuss it uh, ahead, but those come complementary with each other. And even reviewing and reflecting on experiences. So that reviewing and reflecting on experiences, that will involve reviewing and reflecting on what? On your own thinking process. So that's where, reflection and metacognition, comes together. So example that I've put up over here, just to my right, is, let me take notes of this session that are significant, and let me stop judging that I don't understand this time as last session. I did this and it did not help. I don't want to practice it this time. So you see, I'm not asking you to understand this example, but you see the dialogue that I have with me, bringing, preconceived notions that I might have for the sessions, and something that did not help me, and something that can help me now, and something that I would not do again, which I did last time. So it's all awareness, somewhere reviewing the past experience, somewhere regulating what I'm doing, somewhere strategizing what I need to do. All of these are major aspects that we are thinking about in metacognition. Going a little further ahead, and basically, I also take up sessions on neuroscience and critical thinking. And I also had one research grant that talked about impact of critical thinking on the neural behavior of the student teachers. So what kind of impact does critical thinking make on the neurotransmitter levels of the student teachers, which is dopamine, serotonin, GABA, glutamate. So what am I trying to say with all this is basically, um, this skills must be making an impact on you know the neurotransmitter levels as well. So critical thinking being an executive function, metacognitive thinking being an executive function, it can also help you regulate your emotions, right? Because sometimes I even, it happens with me also, while I'm driving to the university, I just feel that something is not right. But then when you reflect on it, you would feel that nothing is bad right now. Why do you feel it is not right? So when you reflect, you'll come to know that there is nothing wrong, but your emotion is just that you feel sometimes low. But what helps me to come out of it is my reflective abilities. And only when I become aware of it, that I'm feeling low and I need to reflect, what will help me do that? Metacognitive abilities. What will help me to come out of it? Reflective abilities. So all of this is part of the prefrontal cortex, and you would see here in the frontal lobe, that's where all these executive functions get processed. And it is with this intention I put up this image, where we see that PFC, prefrontal cortex, in metacognition is consistent with its anatomical positioning. So you would see that frontal lobe has all these executive functions, which talks about thinking, planning, organizing, problem solving, emotion regulation, behavioral control, personality, all of that. Now, what is the difference between cognition and metacognition? And I think all of we did discuss this, just a couple of minutes back, and I'll just brush that up again. So, perf- if you just read this slide, it talks about performance, however thoughtful, is not the same as awareness of how that performance came to be. So, performing is cognition, right? You're doing it, but awareness of how that performance is, how that task was, is metacognition. So I'm doing something, but when I'm evaluating how I've done it, when I become aware of my that task, I'm putting metacognition into consideration. So understanding something is important, but the awareness of how I have understood is somewhere that needs to be captured upon. So I might do a lot of things, and I might sometimes feel that I did this task very nicely, but we forget to reflect on how did I, do it nicely. So we always see, why am I feeling low? So we always put up our emphasis on, why I did not understand this. So we use metacognitive abilities and reflective abilities to think on, something that is not nice, not something that needs reflection. But we do not reflect on, what went well and what helped me build that up. So that is something that we need, focus on by using these two abilities. So I'll just put up certain researches. So this reported success with transfer, according to how people learn, is due to the idea that metacognition help students become more aware of themselves as learners who cognitively monitor their learning strategies and resources. So I'll go a little further and say that, in the last panel discussion, we talked about intuitive thinking. So somewhere intuitive thinking talks about, implying things to yourself. And I had given this example there that we do talk about democracy, right, in the classes, and students are able to very nicely write about democracy. But how many of the students or how many of us are able to think whether I am enough democratic in my behavior or not? So teaching democracy is one point, but implying that democracy to myself is another point. And this implying, when will you be able to imply something? When we have metacognitive abilities and reflective abilities. So even intuitive thinking will require metacognition and reflection. So I think all of the higher order functions that we are looking at, if we look at Bloom's taxonomy, so knowledge, comprehension, application, beyond that, analysis, synthesis, evaluation, all of these higher cognitive abilities will require, you know, cognition, I mean, metacognition and reflection to be uh, looked into and fostered in the classes as well. So the components of metacognition, because I was talking about awareness of our mental processes. Not only that, strategizing on that awareness and using it to the best in the situations required. So those components uh, will need an understanding of the components of metacognition. So there are two components of metacognition. The one is knowledge of cognition, right? That is becoming aware. The second is, as I said, this is something that we can start addressing. That is regulation of cognition, because we are talking about addiction of social media to the students. We are talking about addiction of the other things that we see, phones, and a lot of other abuses that we see. How will we be able to uh, make a difference? I think then regulation of cognition will become important. How will I be able to control on the urges that are not necessary? What will help me? Metacognition. What is that component of metacognition? Regulation of cognition. So knowledge of cognition has again three subsets: declarative knowledge, procedural knowledge, and conditional knowledge, right? Now when I'm talking about declarative knowledge, it will talk about skills and abilities, and the other things in teaching learning process. So it talks about awareness of your skills and abilities. What kind of person am I? Am I a person who's very creative in nature? Am I a person who's very innovative in nature? Am I a person who doesn't speak much but performs good in tasks? What am I? Am I a person who has a very limited attention span? What am I? So that what am I will be answered by the declarative knowledge. Declarative knowledge being the subset of knowledge of cognition in metacognition. The second one is the procedural knowledge. The procedural knowledge will talk about the learning strategies that the learner has to be aware of, in terms of that what strategy, if I use, I'll be able to make better comprehension of things, or what strategy will I use for myself, by which I'll be able to perform better in my academic tasks. What strategy can I use for myself, so that I do not feel low in situations? What strategies can I take up for myself, so that I feel motivated in my daily life? So what will help me in understanding is that procedural knowledge. So how do I process things? That how do I process will require what strategies that needs to be known. What strategies help me? Dash dash dash. And the third is conditional knowledge. Now, conditional knowledge is using declarative knowledge, using procedural knowledge in appropriate situations. So I've just written one example: concept mapping. So I always ask this question in the Viva that I take up: what helped you perform best in your semester? So, my students would think a lot and, think, "Oh, there are many things that have helped, but the best thing that has helped me is concept mapping." So, what is, making them think? It is make the thought process that they have is, "Oh, I have learned, but what helped me to learn?" That is concept mapping. So the learners have to identify the strategies, and the ways in which they'll be able to function the best for them. It is very contextual in nature. And the third is, using this awareness, using the strategies, they should be able to use both of this in appropriate context. So, say for example, in examinations, I should be able to use concept mapping, because my attention span is limited and I don't remember much if I've just memorized, right? So that's an example of declarative, procedural, and conditional knowledge. Second is, I think that I said that, which is has to be considered in the classrooms, is the regulation of cognition. What will help in regulating the cognition? The planning, monitoring, and evaluation. So uh, what will planning involve? So it will involve the learner to map the before setting goals. So before he enters into the course, or the class, say class 7th, what are his pre goals that he looks at, uh, uh, for further, a journey of his 1 year or 6 months, in the class. Then it will require monitoring. So when you have set up a goal, then that goal can be monitored, because once you have mapped that goal, it will bring you an awareness of that goal, so that you'll be able to monitor. And not only that, once you've completed that 1 year, you'll be able to evaluate it. So as I said, all of these needs explicit um, attention. Not only that, explicit writing on it. The metacognitive abilities, I think, are of course there, inherent in all of us. We do all of this, but we can capitalize on all of this if it is written. When you write, all of your fingers are involved. They are somewhere, getting connected with the brain, and somewhere that goal is mapped, and that's where you'll be able to, you know plan for that goal and evaluate it once that, that span is completed. So I think that's where, we will really need explicit attention on, in this modern day education, that is regulation of cognition. Because that is something, as far as I'm concerned, I see something that needs real attention. So this is more about metacognition, and I'll not speak much on this slide, because we also need to look into the reflection part, which is the second part of today's session. But just one thing, metacognition was very initially thought by Flevel in 1976, and since then this component is taking a lot of attention of a lot of educationists around, theorists around, experimentals around, and I think even the teachers are now taking a lot of note of this concept that needs a lot of attention. So uh, if you see in front of me right now, see, this is something that I usually give as end semester assignment to my students, and it talks about very typical questions, a very at a very smaller level, if I can say. uh, uh, I'm asking my students to think about themselves in a very smaller way. I do not say this is the only way. I'm just saying, I'm just putting an example that I have used in my class. That is this. Uh, uh, my students, as an end sem assignment, they come out with. I ask them to answer some 5-6 questions, and the first question is, what is the most significant learning that they take from this entire semester? The second question is, uh, how do they see themselves developing in this entire journey of this semester? The third is, what helped them develop, during this entire semester. um, what are their strengths and weaknesses, and I also ask them to map improvements for themselves, right? And the suggestions that they can make to me. So if you see one significant learning that they need to look into, that will require a lot of reflection on what has happened in the past, in the entire semester, that asks them to think about the entire semester that has happened. Then they talk about how have they proceeded in the journey. So what are the major points in their journey? So they start mapping, this is what I was, and then this was one development that happened, and this was the second, and this was the third, this was the fourth. And then when you see that entire development, I ask them, what helped them develop, what is that important thing that helped them develop. So if you see over here, I don't know whether it is visible or whether it is readable to you all, but it is one of the students assignment, and I've taken things from her assignment by taking her permission. But this says, what helped me develop? It is peer support, it is the environment that helped me develop. It is observing teacher and peers help me develop. It is that personal experience and teachers guidance that help me develop. It is that continuous research. So you see the aspects that she has mapped. What is this talking about? It is making her aware of what helps her develop. So the next time, in the next semester, she will look explicitly into peer support. She will explicitly look into environment. She will explicitly look into observations, right? And then they share. So when they share, the rest of the students are also listening to this, and they also start becoming aware. Acha, this can help us, this can help us. So, and then they also suggest improvements to themselves. So if you see here, practicing reflections she has written, right? So what is the suggestion that she gives to herself? Practice reflections, be more expressive, follow the schedule. So these are the suggestions that she makes to herself. So the point that I'm trying to make up over here is, we need to explicitly put up assignments or things or questions in the class that will help them to reflect on this aspects. I had also asked her strengths, so she has put up her strengths as well. So uh, punctuality, learn through observation is her strength. So if you see here, what helped me develop, observing. And what is her strength? Learning through observation. So she has capitalized on that by making herself aware of that. As I said, I also ask my students to keep an intellectual journal, and I think most of you must be practicing. I do not say that whatever I'm speaking in the session is what you are not practicing. You might be practicing a lot of things that I'm speaking about, but I'm just putting up my point where I'm able to talk about what is it that I am doing in my class for improving the metacognitive abilities of my students. So they carry this intellectual journal with them. They have this journal where they note down these points after every significant portion is covered. So then I very consciously ask them to reflect and use their metacognitive abilities. So these are the questions that I ask them at various intervals. And this is one example of one of my student, when I did my PhD, and I could see that there was a significant improvement in her, where she has talked about significant learning of the week. So the way they are writing their assignments, in this is an example of the intellectual journal that they keep with themselves. One question that I've been asking from this semester to my students is, what is the most unique quality you have, which you see you are master at? So that gives them that creative expression, that gives them a sense of worth, that I am good at these many things, but this is the most unique quality that I have. So once you know that most unique quality, when the teacher is explicitly asking you to reflect on somewhere, it gets attached to you, and the next time you do it, you remember, this is what I had mentioned and this is what I have with me. So that is something that we can look at. This one thing I could see in research where they are saying that ask open questions to the students, and as parents also, I think we can ask these open questions to our children, where it talks about abstract goal representation that helps them you know control their cognitive processes, where allowing such cognitive control to become less externally driven and more self-directed. So rather than it is saying that rather than uh, um, of course the teachers will help, but rather than teachers doing that, let it come from within. How can it come from within? How can it be self driven? Then asking them open questions, where this example says that plan a vacation, right? So select the location, select the make the best itinerary, select the ways in which we'll reach the place, select the best hotel, select the best plan and convey it to me. When you give such tasks, when you give that freedom, that's where that responsibility comes into the picture. So I have to be cost effective, I need to select the best, these are the conveyances or the transportation that I'm seeing, this is the best. All that will happen, all that abstract goal representation will happen and will lead to cognitive control. So that is one thing I think as parents and as teachers we can look at. So that is another strategy. And I'll quickly talk about reflective thinking. I think I just have 10 minutes left with me. So John Dewey was somebody who really worked into this area of reflective thinking, and it is said that it is very active, careful, persistent consideration of a thought. So uh, it is not reactive, it is very proactive, and it is very uh, responsible thought that when you want to reflect and when you consider reflective abilities, it is very conscious in nature, it is very responsible in nature, and it does not talk about impulsive behavior, but it talks about proactive behavior, and it does not talk about routine action, it talks about reflective action. So it is very active, persistent and careful consideration of any thought, and that thought could be a belief, that thought could be your preconceived notions, that thought could be your stereotypes, that thought could be your assumptions, anything. But that reflective thinking is systematic, conscious um, consideration of a thought. And I think if you see the IB curriculum, I think this is very prominently focused by them. That reflective thinking is something that is explicitly practiced by IB curriculum, even CBSE, even state boards. So that is something that we really have to, you know, uh, look into if it needs more attention. What is reflection then? So recognizing what they are doing in that particular moment, as well as consider why they made those rhetorical choices they did. So you know recognizing what am I doing, and why did I make that choice. So you see that reflection and metacognition going hand in hand. And so it is a combination of cognition, metacognition, accessed through reflection. So you cannot access this part because this part needs a lot of reflection to be practiced, even for critical thinking. So when I did my research of critical thinking, the byproduct of that critical thinking intervention program was the metacognitive abilities, improved metacognitive abilities and improved even reflective abilities. So as I said earlier, it is very interdependent with each other, and you will not be able to improve your critical thinking if you do not reflect. You would not be able to have improved metacognitive abilities or metacognitive regulation if you do not have reflection. So that is, I think, somewhere that uh, needs to be there. So we define reflection as a mode of inquiry or deliberate way of systematically recalling the experience. What did I do? Why did I do? How did I do it? How better could I be doing that? All of this is reflection as well as metacognition. Uh, Cognition, metacognition, and reflection, they are overlapping and connected concepts. So you need to develop the capacity for metacognition via reflection, as I said earlier. That develops self agency, that develops complete control over oneself, ultimately, to transfer what they appropriately know across context. So I know, critical thinking now as a concept, but that concept, I should be able to use it in my academic life. I know it and I should be able to use it. So transferring knowledge from knowing to using it in appropriate contexts, you know, that transfer will happen because of cognition, metacognition, and reflection. So the reflective teaching, the teacher has to make choices and to make decisions that provide the best opportunities for learners to learn. So, what to teach, how to teach, when to teach. So reflective teaching is the ability to analyze his teaching practices. Very simply defined, that ability to analyze teaching practices, if you have that, practicing reflective, teaching, that we need to consider. So this is one quick view of, as Madam said earlier also, that attention is something that we need to look at. Working memory is something that we need to look at. I would say one more thing: organization of thoughts we need to look at, because unless you are able to organize your thoughts, you will not be able to, um, prioritize. Right? You will not be able to time manage. You will not be able to, uh, somewhere do better in your academic tasks. So for organization of thoughts, memory, attention, and learning, this is what I used in my past semester for organization. So every time I've seen that, once every day we do revision of concepts. So when I go to the class, I always ask, what is it that we did in the past class? We do that. But after a month of time, they so after some time, they forget what we had done in the first week of the classes. So to bring that awareness, to bring that um, um, organization of what you have done in the entire month, and to bring your focus to what you had been doing in the past 1 month, I asked them to do this. So I asked them to make a structure of what you have learned, in the past 1 month in my course. So they start listing down things. We did clarity, we did accuracy, we did precision, we did this. And so what I asked them to do is, put whatever you know out of your memory right now, whatever you remember from the past 1 month. So they start noting down things from whatever they remember. The second stage, what I do is I ask them, now go back and refer to notes to see what you have missed out on, noting down. So they go back, they flip the notes, and they talk with their peers, saying that, you have this, I do not have this, let me check. Now I was absent. So they start adding to what they remember out of their memory, and they start extending those thoughts, extending from the notes. Then the third part that I do is I start revising. So then I ask them, you have your thoughts from the memory, you have your extended thoughts from the notes. Now, write what you think is new from what I'm speaking and revising. So then they start noting. There is one more structure to it. So if you see over here, there are colors, right? So they have used this color scheme to differentiate between something that they have noted from their memory, something that they have noted from their extension, by referring to the notes, and something that I have discussed, and again extending on those what in terms of revision. And so you see different structures, so they like to create such structures, right? They're very they become innovative, they become creative because they like to show different designs. They like to note, and once you remember something, I'm trying to remember something, and once they remember that happiness that they have, oh, I remembered. They will talk with their peers. I am not able to remember what is that example that madam said, what is that assignment that we did. So they start noting. That's where that happiness, that's where that interaction, that's where that creation, and that's when madam, I did this, see this, using different colors. That's where they feel relatable, they feel relevant, they feel happy, or they also feel very complex. I mean, they feel that frustration. I'm not able to remember, there are so many things. But I tell them, do it consciously. So they, once they start doing it, they get used to it. So that is one thing that we have been doing in the past semesters. And this is mapping of thoughts explicitly. And if in the coming times, if I'm able to talk about critical thinking, I'll also talk about mapping of thoughts. And this mapping of thoughts somewhere deals with the aspect of metacognition. I'll not talk in depth about this right now, but this mapping of thoughts also help them to, come back to their current thought. Because as I said, when they come back, when they come for the first class, they have many thoughts, and I always want them to, select the thought that is most important. That is your class. So you focus, so you attend to what we are doing in critical thinking classes. So this mapping helps them to attend to what we are doing in the classes. And the third is the self talk that they I ask them to do in my classes, so that they are able to know what is happening with them. And sometimes we just don't know what is happening, so it asks them to note down. And somewhere I've seen children crying when they do a self talk, so it helps them vent out their emotions into the diary. They get used to writing and all of that. So if we get time later in the coming sessions, we could talk about critical thinking as well. And so I would like to say that the expected outcomes out of metacognition, reflective thinking, critical thinking, maybe improved focus, attention, increased awareness, motivation, organization of thoughts, better cognition, reasoning, memory, and emotion handling, and many more. But yeah, I would like to say a thank you to all of you for patiently listening to me for almost 50 minutes, 55 minutes from now. And I did not, in 1 hour it is very difficult to cover this important two aspects. But I tried to make sure that I give enough examples for making a better understanding of what I'm trying to take up in this session. Thank you so much. And
Okay, ma'am, we have a first question here. Teachers who have artistic abilities would be augmenting the metacognitive abilities. Do you agree with this, Professor?
Yeah, that is a very nice question. And, uh, it opens up one more dimension for, improving the metacognitive abilities. Right now, we are doing a project on, art and critical thinking. So, integrating art into, critical thinking that we are doing in the classes. So, I've been asking them to, use the processes of critical thinking to create an art piece. So it could be anything. But when they are doing that, that's where somewhere they are able to improve on their metacognitive abilities, because a lot of processes go on in their mind. Uh, what art piece to use, how am I to draw this, what should I be conveying, what should be the background thoughts, and all of that. I think that makes them more aware of you know uh, what they are all about, and that creative expression that you know gets an edge in them. There are many who come and say that I'm not good at art. I told them it's not art, it's critical thinking first and then art. So you use those processes to make an art, or you use an art piece to teach critical thinking. So somewhere when they do efforts, that's where they are able to feel satisfied, that's where they are able to have that creative expression. And I would say that, yeah, I agree to what you are saying, it does improve the way they are functioning.
Thank you, ma'am, for that. We have another question. At what age metacognition should become a part of a pedagogy?
Again, a very good question. And I think uh, uh, from my experience, if I talk about it, see, I've been putting up critical thinking to student teachers now, and my student teachers, they vary from the age of 22 to 40, 45 at times. And what happens is the barrier that I face when I teach critical thinking is majorly uh, this that when I start teaching critical thinking, they already have established mental processes with them. So the one thing that they say is that see, we were successful in the past and we have been doing things nicely till this time. Why are you asking us to think again about what we have been doing, right? So at that point, I feel that it is very difficult to mold the way one thinks, because they've already established that thought process, and somewhere it is validated also by many, right? So it is very difficult to come back and reflect and think about what was good, what was not so good. So but then if we are able to do it at from, I would say, the pre-primary levels, that habit of reflection, that habit of metacognition would begin from an initial age, and then that habit becomes an internalization. So I see IB schools practicing it from pre-primary stage. Their PYP programs, they practice reflection as one integral component of their program. So I think it should begin from uh, uh, the primary years itself, the constructive years itself.
Thank you, ma'am, for that. We have another question here. How do you inculcate consistency in critical thinking, especially in the age group of 8 to 12 years? Also, what motivates children in this age group?
uh, so there are two, I think, questions.
Yes,
Can you
yes.
repeat
Two
that
questions.
first question?
Yeah, first question is, how do you inculcate consistency in critical thinking, especially in the age group of 8 to 12 years?
Okay. So I think consistency in critical thinking, that is why if I answer it from my perspective, it is more of from a teacher's perspective, it is more of explicit practicing of that reflective abilities every time I think a session is completed, or when a major topic is covered, or I don't know, that intervals can be decided, but that is something that they need to do every day, I think. Because it is like this, that if a forest is there, and if the path, I mean, if there is a way, and if that way is not used, you would see weeds around that path. But if that path is used again and again, you would not see the weeds. So I think this path of reflective thinking has to be used again and again, so that it doesn't get lost, and till the time it is internalized in the character. I think that's when then you can leave that child, that's where that self regulation will happen. But initially, I think intervals have to be decided, but from my perspective, it has to be done regularly, so that it gets ingrained into the mind.
Thank you, ma'am, for that. There's one more question which he has asked. Also, what motivates children in this age group,
In the sense,
in the 8 to
the
12 years? Yeah.
motivates in terms of the reflective thinking, or from what perspective?
Uh, Preeti, can you clarify it?
I think if I talk about this from my perspective with student teachers, I think what motivates them is um, when they put up their point of view to everybody, when they are able to express themselves, and when people know about them, that's when they feel I said this in my class today, and there were these 20 students who were listening to me, and they clapped for me, you know that ownership comes to them only when they are able to put up their point of view. So I think that expressions, and I think even expressing about crucial issues that we would like to discuss, I think what to discuss could be thought of, but when they're able to put up their opinion into the class, I think that's where they feel really motivated.
Yeah, ma'am. She has said it's from critical thinking perspective that she wanted.
So what motivates them to think critically? I'm not sure what would motivate at that age group, but I think if we are able to map the reward to them, you know, this is what will, accumulate to you if you are able to think critically. So if you are able to explicitly map that outcome to them, I think that can motivate them, because I think each one of us wants to see improved version of ourselves, and each one of us needs validation from others at a point of time. So if we are able to, see that improvement in me, and if my teacher also says very good, you have improved on this, I think that will help me motivate. So I think that could be thought of. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am, for that. We have another question here. How does the development of cognitive control skills contribute to academic success in today's education system?
Yeah, that is again a very good question. And we talked about, two subsets of metacognition. That is, we talked about declarative knowledge. We talked about procedural knowledge. We talked about conditional knowledge, and we talked about planning, monitoring, and evaluating. So I think if I am able to know that I am a person who cannot learn, or I'm not able to express when there are 20 students around, if I am aware of it, then somewhere, and if I have to express myself in front of 20 students, and if I'm aware that I'm not able to express well in front of 20 students, I think I'll strategize for it, right? Only when I'm aware that this is my weakness, and only when I'm able to, know what will help me, you know come out of it, I'll be able to have better presentation when I do it the next time, because I'm aware, because I know that, concept mapping works the best. I'll be able to, use it for myself, and that's where we'll see improvement in, learning.
Thank you, ma'am, for that. Are there specific subjects or areas of study that particularly benefit from strong cognitive control abilities?
Are there specific?
Are there any specific subjects or areas of studies that actually particularly will benefit from the strong cognitive control abilities?
um, I mean, the benefit is vast. If we talk about subjects, it will cut across all the subjects, and it will cut across all the domains of life. I mean, uh, a person who has metacognitive skills, a person who has reflective skills, a person who has critical thinking skills will excel everywhere, and it will cut across. And if I'm able to process the content in a better way, I will also have better academic, output in my subject or discipline that I'm taking up. And if I'm able to become a better version of myself, I'm also benefiting my personal life. So it cuts across everything.
Ma'am, are there any challenges associated with incorporating these cognitive skills into the existing educational framework?
Yeah, the challenges that I feel now is something where, um, this assumption that students have that I know everything. That and when we start putting up these points to them, that, use reflective skills or use metacognitive skills, they are not very inclined to use it, because they have not been practicing it from their formative years. So that is one challenge. And the second challenge I feel is that, even if you are aware, I have seen that they're not able to regulate. So that is another challenge. That knowing is one point. I see students that they know what they are all about. But the other challenge that I see is they're not able to regulate it. So what will help them regulate it is where we need to, use these strategies, is where we need to, very carefully use motivation as well. Because if we are not using motivation again in that framework, somewhere that balance will not be, will not have that balance. So it is a very careful mixture of all of that will be required. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am, for that. There's another question here. Should the assessment of cognitive control and reflective thinking be a formal part of the education system?
Yeah, it should be, because from this student teachers perspective, and from B.Ed program perspective, I think reflective thinking is something that is an explicit course in the teacher education program. So we are already practicing that, and we are already assessing that aspect. Metacognition is something that, explicitly it is not focused, but I'm trying to bring that, into the courses that we are teaching. And I think IB curriculum is very, uh, very disciplined about it. I think each aspect that they take up, they are building the students on, this. So it has to be an explicit part of whatever we are doing. And of the subjects that we teach, so as simple as what did I learn in my class today, what helped me learn in my class today, and what is it that I find difficult to understand in today's class. As simple as these three questions can help them, even start that process. That starting is important. Once you are starting it, habituation is something that we need to look into then.
Thank you, ma'am, for that. Do we have any more questions? Ma'am, there's one more question here. Are there digital tools or platforms designed specifically to support the development of these cognitive skills?
um, I've not looked into the digital tools. I'm a person who, makes my own questions, makes them, write explicitly, do things in front of me. So I'm not very much aware about the digital tools. Yeah, if there are, do let me know. Thank you.